Well, as is fairly self-evident, this is the Richard and Judy Book Club. You've clicked through to join us exclusively with W.H. Smith. And this is our latest offering. It's My Dear, I Wanted to Tell You by Louisa Young. This is a fine piece of writing. It's a beautiful story. It begins before the First World War, and it features a young lad called Riley Purefoy. He's a working class boy. And through a chapter of accidents, he ends up working as an artist assistant in a grand London house, which is the household is headed by Sir Arthur Waveney. And Sir Arthur has a beautiful daughter called Nadine, who's roughly Riley's age, and they grow up together through the years, and they fall in love with each other. And when the family sees that happening, they go very cold towards Riley and basically freeze him out. And the World War I has just broken out, so Riley, on impulse really, signs up and finds himself, almost like that, in the trenches in France. That's a fairly neat summary of how it begins, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, that's about the first chapter or two.
OK, that'll do. And then, from a very readable, conventional opening to a novel, it turns into something very special indeed. Because what you do is you contrast the sheer hell of the trenches with the normality and the banality of life that's simultaneously going on back in London. There's one wonderful moment where you make it clear that some of these lads, when they finally got some leave, they'd see a friend's guts blown out at breakfast time, be on a train back to the Channel ports at lunchtime, and possibly that evening be walking in a London park in a normal world. Totally different from this planet that they've been on. That was very, very arresting, and the passages that are set in the trenches are brutal. I mean, you don't pull any punches, do you, in terms of describing what it was like?
It's a very odd thing, because when you're writing about something that you have no experience of, and which is real, you have an absolute sense of responsibility, because, you know, that was our grandfathers and great-grandfathers, and all the time I was writing it, I actually had a photograph pinned up above my desk of my boyfriend's great-grandfather, who appears in the book, actually, in a sort of slightly fictionalised form, and he died on the Somme. And so I had him looking at me, you know, with his face very like his great-grandson's in his ears, and you just think, you did. It was real. All that was real, and you read their accounts, and you just think, I've got to be really honest about this. As honest as I can.
On the back, I mean, the title is My Dear, I Wanted to Tell You, and that obviously comes from a letter, but on the back of the book there's an illustration of the actual letters that were sent out on the behalf of wounded soldiers. Yeah,
what it is that if you write home from the trenches, your letter has to go through the censors, and it will take forever. So what they would do is they give soldiers pre-printed cards which you would fill in and just sort of tick the box. So that particular one is, My Dear, and you fill in, you know, mum or you know, girlfriend, whoever it might be. I wanted to tell you that I have received a slight serious wound in my, and you delete as applicable and fill in. So you're sitting there and you're up to here with morphine and you've been shot to bits and you're given this card and it's sort of tick the box and send it home to mum. What are you going to say? I've received a serious wound in my genitals or something. What are you going to do?
But at the end, the little printed bit back from the Ministry of Defence is, I'm surrounded by these wonderful doctors and care nurses who are doing absolutely everything they can, so basically don't worry. And then, of course, in many cases, it was very, very, very much not that.
Riley and Nadine's love affair continues through the book, but like so many love affairs of that time involving men who were serving at the front and somehow surviving, what they were experiencing there on a daily basis stood between them and their loved one, whether it was their wife or their girlfriend. It was so unutterably awful that really human language couldn't describe it. It wasn't just the emotional impact it had on them, but the physical, what they were seeing every day. And that's a real problem, isn't it, for Riley, to actually communicate to Nadine what it's like.
Well, this is, you know, whenever anybody says, you know, oh, Dad never talked about the war, and you see the same thing, the Second World War and Vietnam, that if you say what's really going on, then you're somehow polluting the very thing that you're protecting, which is lovely, glorified, idealised home life, and you know, honey still for tea and all that. So they couldn't tell their families what they were really going through. And if you think about how young they were as well, and then you've got the people at home going, oh dear, we can't get any butter and there's no taxis in London. And then you've got the men and boys suffering as they were. So this is another reason for the title as well, you know, because on one level they long to communicate with their wives, their friends, their families, their parents. On the other hand, they simply can't, and even if they did, it wouldn't come over real. So this is why, in the end, I have Nadine actually go to the war as a nurse, which again is a marvellous old cliche, soldier and nurse. But there's a reality behind that, but the emotional reality of what people suffered and how they dealt with it.
Well, it's been described, your book has been described as birdsong for the new millennium.
Yeah.
It's better than Birdsong.
Do you think so? Birdsong is a fabulous book by Sebastian Faulks, but I agree.
Well, all comparisons are slightly specious, obviously. Birdsong's a marvellous book. This is a very marvellous book, he said in an illiterate way. It's very special, and I love the pace of it. I love the way it starts in a fairly, it's a very interesting, but quite a mundane sort of way, you know, it's a story that you might have read before, and then just goes into a completely different place, as I said at the beginning, almost onto another planet. How much of the descriptions of particularly the injuries that these guys suffered, you go into great detail. Where did you get that from? Imperial War Museum?
My grandmother was a sculptor, and during the First World War, one of the things that she did was work with Major Harold Gillies, who set up the first
plastic surgeon.
specialist facial injuries unit.
Yes.
And so she would be casting the faces of the wounded men. Yeah. A very complicated job and quite horrific and sort of miraculous.
These were the first skin grafts, weren't they?
Yeah. Well, not quite the first, but you know, war gives you a never-ending supply of otherwise healthy young men who need phenomenal treatment, and so they sort of made it up on the hoof, and they were working with the most, you know, sort of rebuilding jaws and eyes and noses and skin from here and there, and so I found out about that through my grandmother, and once you start looking into that, which I first did about 20 years ago when I was writing her biography. And once you see what they were doing and you look at the photographs and you put it together with that letter and you think, oh my word, oh dear.
Talking about your grandmother, was she the widow of Captain Scott of the Antarctic?
Yes.
And the mother of Sir Peter Scott?
Yes, the very one.
Extraordinary history you've got. I mean, and you actually grew up in the house where Peter Pan was written.
I'm surrounded by ghosts. I've got really quite brilliant people circling me and have had since a very small age.
Well, that's obviously given you inspiration. They've been very benevolent
Endlessly.
ghosts, to be honest. It really is. It's a lovely book.
Just going back very quickly to what you were saying about the injuries, I mean, what I didn't realise was how comprehensive they were. For example, I mean, there were men without any face. I mean, nothing. They should have died, really. And and as you make clear in the book, they had to carry on. The war finished, but they had to carry on in these states. And some of them were wearing tin masks so they could go out in the street, because some people would faint when they saw the sight of them. Well, it's an engrossing story. It's beautifully written, and the romantic side of it, the love aspect of it, is just charming. It's absolutely charming and very real, and you can imagine it all happening exactly as you've written it down. Many congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful book. My dear, I wanted to tell you, you'll get the sense of the title when you read the book, by Louisa Young. Many, many congrats. You can find out more about all the books that we feature here on the website here. That's whsmith.co.uk/Richard and Judy. Don't forget you can download our podcasts. That's free from iTunes. And at the back of all the books that we're pumping out this season, lots and lots of extra content. We've got a little Q&A with the authors in the back, all sorts of ideas for discussions for the book and other things as well. So enjoy.